Captain Lena Cord had been inside the Fort Devlin Review Board chamber for 11 minutes before she decided the outcome was already settled. She had the file. She had read it twice on the drive over, flagging nothing because there was nothing to flag. Colonel Wren's case was airtight in the way that only procedural cases could be, the kind built not from lies but from careful omissions, from the selection of which facts to surface and which to leave buried. For months of filings, 17 documented discrepancies between the captain's field log and the official command authority record, a jurisdictional challenge that, on paper, was almost elegant. Cord was 26 years old and 6 months into her JAG assignment, and she had been handed this case at 7 that morning with the quiet implication that her job was to observe, to make sure the proceeding was clean, and to sign the summary when it was over. She took her seat at the far end of the panel table and looked at the woman across from her. Captain Mara Yellen sat with both hands flat on the table in front of her, no notes, no binder, no legal pad. She wore her uniform the way people wear things they have stopped thinking about. Naturally, the way a carpenter holds a hammer. Her ribbons were in order. Her posture was the kind that came not from drilling, but from something older, something the body learned in a place where slumping meant dying. She was 28 years old. She looked, Cord thought, like someone who had already been through whatever this room could offer and had simply decided it did not concern her. Colonel Wren opened the proceeding at 0900 sharp. He was a methodical man. Cord had encountered him twice in corridor exchanges, and both times had come away with the impression of someone who had never once acted on impulse in his professional life. He laid out his case the way a surveyor marks a plot. Measured lines, no wasted motion. The commission authority question. The command log discrepancies. The gap in the chain of command record during the Firebase Cowern incident, 7 months prior. The fact that Captain Yellen had, by Wren's reading of the field documentation, exercised authority she had not been formally designated to hold at the time the incident unfolded. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The commission authority exercised during the Cowern event, Wren said, setting down a page, was not consistent with the captain's documented role at that time. This board is convened to correct that record and void the associated commendation entry accordingly. This is a procedural matter. He used the word procedural the way some men use the word unfortunately, as a kind of anesthetic, something to make the wound feel administrative rather than personal. Cord watched Yellen through all of it. The captain did not shift, did not blink more than was natural. When Wren finished laying out the filing summary, the board chair, a lieutenant colonel named Adler, asked if the captain wished to make a statement for the record. Yellen said, "The record will speak, sir." That was all. Adler nodded, wrote something, and turned back to Wren to begin the formal entry process. The proceeding had a momentum to it now, the smooth, downhill roll of institutional procedure, and Cord was already reaching for her pen when the door opened. It did not open loudly. There was no dramatic bang, no thrown-wide entrance. It opened the way a door opens when someone who does not need to announce themselves decides it is time to enter a room. Brigadier General Harold Voss stepped through it, carrying a single manila envelope and a small external hard drive, and he crossed to the head of the table without asking permission and set both items in front of the board chair before Adler could speak. "General," Adler said carefully. "Don't stand," Voss said. "This won't take long." He looked at Wren without expression. "Colonel, I'd like to table the voiding entry for approximately 20 minutes. Wren's jaw did not move. "Sir, the proceeding is..." "I know what the proceeding is." Voss pulled out the chair across from Yellen and sat down. He was a compact man, gray at the temples, with the weathered steadiness of someone who had spent a great deal of time outdoors in places where the weather was the least of the problems. He looked at the hard drive on the table and then at the room's projector screen, mounted on the wall behind the board chair. "Someone want to cue that up." One of the junior panel members, a young warrant officer at the far end of the table, reached for the drive. Adler nodded to him. The screen flickered on. Cord looked at Yellen. The captain had not moved. She was looking at the hard drive with an expression Cord could not immediately name. Not relief, something quieter than relief. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has been waiting a long time to see a particular object again. The recording was audio only. A waveform pulsed on the screen as the file opened. A timestamp in the lower corner reading 0217 hours, and below it, in plain text, Callern FWD Firebase, classified, JSOC after action record. The room heard artillery first, distant, then close, a rolling compression of sound, even through the conference room speakers. And then her voice. It was calm. That was the first thing. That was the thing Cord would remember long after she forgot the specific words. The voice on the recording was calm the way a river is calm. Not because nothing is happening beneath it, but because the surface has been held by something with the strength to hold it. It was Yellen's voice, unmistakably, though lower than the voice that had said the record will speak 20 minutes ago, flattened by focus, stripped to its essentials. All stations, Duskwall. Command is down. Both officers are down. I have a net. Acknowledge. Silence on the recording, 3 seconds, and then a crackle of acknowledgments coming in from positions Cord could not identify. Copy all. Sergeant Marsh, I need your count. Over. The recording moved. Voss did not explain it or narrate it. He let it run. 5 hours and 19 minutes of audio had been compressed, Cord would later learn, to the 42 minutes of most critical command traffic, but there was no compression evident in what she was hearing. Every call was deliberate. Every grid adjustment was read back twice. At one point, Cord would look it up later and find it in the citation, but she understood it in real time by the flatness in Yellen's voice, the particular quality of absolute control. At one point, the captain called it danger close artillery adjustment on her own position, reading the coordinates with the same measured cadence she had used for every other call in the preceding 4 hours. And somewhere behind that, voice the ground was coming apart. The room was very quiet. Wren had his hands flat on the table. He was looking at them. Cord looked at the waveform on the screen and listened to Yellen direct a 43-minute extraction under direct fire. Sector by sector, position by position, every man accounted for, every egress route confirmed before she moved to the next. And she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that she had never in her life heard anything that sounded so much like the definition of the word command. The recording ended. The timestamp in the corner read 0736 hours. The waveform went flat. Voss reached into the manila envelope and produced a single printed sheet, which he slid to the center of the table without speaking. The warrant officer at the far end pulled it toward him, glanced at it, and reached for the projector cable. A moment later, the board screen filled with a list of names, 27 of them, printed in 2 columns, with a heading above them in plain block text. Firebase Callern Extraction, confirmed personnel, operation record sealed. The names were there for 30 seconds before anyone in the room moved. Adler was the first. He stood, and it was not the movement of a man following a protocol. It was the movement of a man who could no longer remain seated. The 2 officers flanking him rose without looking at each other. The warrant officer at the end of the table came to his feet. One by one, around the table, every officer in the room rose. Cord stood because she had been in the Army long enough to know what you did when a room stood, and because she could not have stayed in her chair if she had tried. Voss reached into the envelope again and produced a set of oak leaves. Major's insignia. The promotion Yellen's record showed had been held in administrative suspension for 7 months, and he set them on the table in front of her. The Callern command record has been declassified as of this morning, Voss said. He did not look at Wren. The commission authority Captain Yellen exercised during that event was designated under Emergency Succession Protocol 74 Bravo, which does not appear in the standard command log because the log was generated by the post-action administrative team, not by the field record. The designation was valid. The commendation entry stands. He looked at Yellen. The promotion is restored, effective the date of the action. Major. Yellen reached for the oak leaves and closed her hand around them. She did not smile. She did not look at Wren. She looked at the list of 27 names still on the screen, and she held the oak leaves in her closed hand. And her face was composed in the way that faces are composed when everything inside them has been settled for a long time and the room is only now catching up. Voss turned to Adler. You'll want to close the proceeding on the record. Yes, sir. Adler looked down at his notes and then back up. For the record, the commission authority challenge filed against Captain Yellen is dismissed in its entirety. The commendation entry is confirmed. The promotion order is reinstated. He paused. Call sign Duskwall will be entered into the theater after action record accordingly. Cord had written nothing in 40 minutes. Her legal pad was blank. She looked at Colonel Wren. He was still standing. He had risen with the room, because even Wren understood what a room demanded, but he was standing the way a man stands when the ground has shifted under him and he has not yet decided whether to acknowledge it. His 4 months of filings were on the table in front of him, neat and complete and entirely beside the point, and he was looking at them with an expression Cord could not catalog. She thought he would say something. He did not. He picked up his files, squared the edges against the table, and held them. That was all. The proceeding closed at 1,023 hours. Officers filed out in the way people file out of rooms where something significant has happened, quietly, without the usual corridor conversation. Cord gathered her things last, and she was reaching for her legal pad when she stopped. She put the legal pad back on the table. She looked at the screen, still showing the list of 27 names. The projector left on because the warrant officer had left the room before thinking to turn it off. 27 men had come off that firebase. One of them had been 19 years old. One had a shrapnel wound in his left shoulder that would heal and leave a scar he would carry for the rest of his life. 2 had been carried by their teammates for the last 400 meters of the egress because they could not walk. All 27 were alive, because a 28-year-old captain had picked up the radio at 0217 hours when both her officers went down and had held the net for 5 hours and 19 minutes by the force of a steadiness that Cord suspected was not something you trained into a person. It was something a person either had or did not have, something forged in a place or a moment or a series of moments that left no external mark. Yellen was gone. She had walked out ahead of Voss, unhurried, the oak leaves in her hand. Cord stood alone in the hearing room at Fort Devlin, the projector still throwing those 27 names on the wall, and she thought about the word procedural, about how it had sounded in Wren's mouth that morning. Smooth, final, closing a door. She picked up her pen and wrote one thing on the legal pad. Duskwall. Then she clicked the pen closed, picked up her things, and walked out into the corridor, where the morning light was coming through the windows at the end of the hall, and the Army was going about its business, as though the most important 20 minutes it would conduct that week had just happened quietly in a windowless room, which she understood now was exactly how the most important things always happened. She did not think she would forget it. She was right.